Alright, so today we're going to be talking about exercise implementation. I think it's something that is highly overvalued in the fitness community, but I suppose I better give my 2 cents on it because I don't have too much to talk about right now, and I feel like talking. So, I guess we should start with the question of how should I implement workouts into my program? And the best answer I can give to you is is whatever keeps you coming, whatever you enjoy the most. People talk about how, but this isn't ideal, or this isn't optimal, or, but this has a higher prone risk of injury, or, you might not have time to recover. You see, all of those things are very vapid if you don't get in there in the first place. So whatever your schedule allows, and whatever you enjoy the most are the two biggest things. Now, if you don't really have a preference, or if what you want to do is what is most ideal, then that really depends on your circumstances, which I'm just going to give a few examples towards. So, if building strength in heavyweight compound movements is your primary goal, very little else matters, then what you want to do is you want to train muscles from the most neural activation and the biggest actual load on the body down to the smallest. And the factors that come into that are how many muscles there are in the movement, and how many supporting muscles especially. So let's use bench press for example. If the weight that I'm pressing, so in the bench press, the weight that you press up requires, yes, it works your chest, but it also requires heavy involvement from the deltoids and triceps. Now some people argue that depending on how you do it, you can lessen or greaten that effect. Let's just not get into that for now. Now, that's what it activates. So that's not only a lot of muscles, but there's also many other smaller muscle groups that have a very large part in activating it, such as the back. You might not think so, but a lot of people actually injure their backs from doing bench press, and that's actually a big reason why. It's because your back, even though you're forming a rack with it, a lot of those muscles are there tensing or not tensing to make sure that your body is stable when you're performing that movement. So essentially the point that I'm getting at is that it really depends. So you choose to implement it based upon what movements have the most muscles involved and put the biggest load on the body, and B, you should focus on what movements specifically do you want to get good at. So let's say you want to have a really heavy bench press, deadlift, and squat. So then what do? Well, let's say you're doing a 3-day split push-pull legs. You would First exercise you'll do is bench press for the chest day. First exercise you'll do for legs is squats. Some people might argue deadlifts, and yeah, I get it, but also squats work more legs than deadlifts, so just be quiet. And then there's the third group, which would be back, which would be deadlift. Now, obviously, these different movements work more than just the muscle groups that they obviously do, like the example I gave of bench press. So when you're working squats, yeah, it works your quads and your glutes and all that, but it also works a lot of your lower back and your spinal erectors in order to make sure that essentially your spine doesn't crumble in on itself and you fucking die. And so, in summary, you want to implement it based upon what has the biggest load and what is most important to you. Now, let's say that your goal is aesthetics. Then how exactly do you want to implement your workouts for that goal? Well, for me, I have a very complicated philosophy when it comes to this, but I'd boil it down to choose what muscle group needs the most development, and then focus hard on that. And then when that's up to scratch and you're satisfied with it, obviously you're working everything else in the meantime, but that's what you want to put the most emphasis to. So you don't necessarily have a stable, solid program where you only do this day, only do this that day. It's more fluid based upon what you perceive to be your requirements. So let's say that your back is quite weak, then you might want to implement, and we still apply the same logic of implementing our heaviest compound movements first. You might want to start with, if your lats are underdeveloped, some pull-ups into close grip pronated lat pull down, for example, because that is a lot of stimulus on the back, which promotes a lot of growth. those two different movements hit the actual muscle groups in slightly different ways. So when you're doing a pull-up, assuming that you're doing it with a wider grip, that would work more the teres major and a bit of the rhomboids too. Whereas if you're doing it close, like this, a lat pull-down, like that is primarily solely engaging the lats, with also a little bit of bicep involvement with that too. Now, same logic applies to if your legs are underdeveloped, you want to focus on maybe I suppose leg press first, but it could also, it's very flexible. It could be leg press, it could be squats, as long as it's your more taxing movements first. That's what you want to do. And why is this the case? Why should you put your most taxing movements first? Well, essentially, it's because when you start your workout, that is when you have the most energy. That is when you have the greatest ability to recruit muscle tissue, and that is when you're able to provide the highest quality stimulus to actually incur muscle growth, assuming that you're working to proximal failure. Now, and then as you progress on, you still want to do other more controlled, more isolated movements. So let's say even machine movements or cables, or just focusing on singular muscle groups. You do want to incorporate those because that helps further develop your body as a all-inclusive package. Okay, you don't want to just focus on the heavy compounds and then that's it, because you will inevitably develop weaknesses. You will hit your plateau far earlier. You will it just won't be advantageous to you, versus if you also put a little bit more variety in other areas. Now, if you're starting out, then yeah, that can work quite well, but literally anything works when you're a newbie, so that doesn't say much. So what have we gathered from this talk? Well, in summary, you want to put your... Oh, actually, no, I'm not even going to repeat that. You've heard it a million times. And you also want to implement things based upon their importance to you. So it's how much load how much fatigue they incur, and how important it is to developing towards your goals. So yeah, there you go.